Let me introduce my friend, Bill Montford.
Thank you, Ted, and good morning, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be back with you. It's NEBA, and I go way, way back. And in fact, I think I was on the county commission when NEBA started many years ago, and I've always tried to follow your discussions and your interest. I always have with great interest. I got to tell you, I have 5 grandchildren too, and that's a blessing to have 5 grandchildren, and they're all right here in Tallahassee. And Tallahassee has been good. Leon County has been exceptionally good to me and my family. I grew up in Bluntstown, 5th generation right here in North Florida, and I just want to tell you what an honor it is to serve as your state senator. It's a pleasure to be in that position, but it's even more of a pleasure to be able to work with the kind of people we have in North Florida. Ted mentioned I have 11 counties, and if I may share those with you. I have Taylor, Hamilton, Madison, Jefferson, Leon, Wakulla, Franklin, Gulf, Calhoun, Liberty, and Gaston. It's taken me a while to be able to convince some of my colleagues in Central and South Florida, who some of them have one county, or some of them have a piece of one county. And it's hard sometimes for them to understand that when you have 11 counties, that means you have 11 sheriffs, you have 11 county commissioners, 11 everything, and they all have their own priorities. It's a little different. As a matter of fact, Appropriations Chair asked me one day, he said, Bill, we appreciate the hard work you're doing. Give me your top three priorities. Make sure that we can help you. So I showed up with 33. And he said, what are you doing? I said, I've got 11 counties. Top 3 in every county means 33. I'm an old math teacher. I've got that figured out. And he said, I don't think it works that way. And I said, well, that's probably because you're chair. But it's certainly an honor and a privilege to be your state senator. And by the way, I'm up for re-election next year. I probably shouldn't have said that.
No,
I'm not going to wait till Monday to announce. In fact, I've already got my campaign account open, and I understand this is a mini fundraiser for me. Thank you, Ted. We've got a basket on the side over there. Let me tell you how, education is my background, and I was just sharing this morning how much things have changed in education. Just in the brief time that I started as a math teacher, I was at Bellevue Middle School, and I was behind the school on duty, and I saw some guys smoking, and it wasn't Todd. It could have been, or it could have been his business partner. It wasn't him. But anyway, I started down that way, and today kids are different. They just run, and you can't catch them. Back then they were very polite, and they wouldn't run, but they did throw everything out of the pockets. So I picked it all up and took to the principal, got the boys, took them to the principal, and it was, some of you may remember Stan Heileman, Chad Heileman's brother. He was our principal, and he was on his desk and had the boys there, and Mr. Heileman looked at me and said, you know what this is, don't you? And I said, yeah, Prince Albert, roll your own. Now, if you don't know what that is, you used to buy tobacco in a can, Prince Albert can, and you just roll your own cigarettes. Yes, Prince Albert can. And he said, no, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Bluntstown. He said, boy, this is marijuana. And I said, I've never heard of that. And he said, you got a lot to learn. I'm one of those few politicians, no offense, whose true stories are really true. And that's a true story. And so things have changed, and I've learned a lot. So let me start my remarks this morning with education just a minute. It's easy for us to point to education and say what's wrong, and that's usually what we do. But let me tell you, the state of Florida, we are in a good situation with our education systems. and that's public and private, charter schools, which are charter schools. And I'm proud to say, too, we have a very strong homeschool program in this state as well. Not too many years ago, when you talked about schools in Florida, or schools in any state, you're talking about the public schools. We're very blessed in Florida to have a wide range of choices for parents. And if some of those choices been options, been poor choices, obviously. But overall, we've got a great education system in Florida, and it's getting better. In our zest to do things right and to hold people accountable, though, we started a few years ago on high stakes testing, and let me share with you some statistics that goes back to 1995-96 when I ran for school superintendent. In this county, in 1 year, the previous year, 94-95 school year, in all of Leon County, there were less than 20 students retained in the 5th grade. In the 8th grade, there was less than 40. In the 9th grade, there was 400 and something 9th graders retained. Now, those kids didn't get dumb over the summer. What was happening then in Leon County, in Florida, was that we had no standards to speak of. As a matter of fact, in this community, in this school district, if you failed the 6th grade, for example, you could not fail 7th or 8th, regardless of your grades. Now, we were not in the business and should not have been in the business of failing students and retaining them. But we had built into our system, and it's not just here in Leon County, just in Florida. Remember in the 60s and 70s we went through, we got to take care of their self-esteem and so on, which is good. But in our push to do that, we lowered our standards. We did not have a level of accountability that was necessary until our students here in Leon County got to the 9th grade. And the 9th grade was the first year that they had to pass math and English to go to the 10th grade. So at Lincoln High School, where I was, I had 2,300 students. So you would figure 450 9th graders, a fourth of them. We had 600 and something 9th graders. Now, some of them had been in the 9th grade for 2 or 3 years, and what would happen is they would drop out. So thank goodness, we began to change that in Florida. Jeb Bush, Frank Brogan showed up and said, you know, we're going to have standards, and we were saying the same thing in Leon County then. We're going to have, every grade is going to have a set of standards. I mean, when I was in Bluntstown in the 4th grade, Miss Annabelle Taylor was my teacher. Gray-haired, bun on the head, literally, you know, those stacked black shoes, you know. And she had 2 or 3 rules. One, every morning we recited the Pledge of Allegiance. We said the Lord's Prayer, and everybody stood up individually and recited a Bible verse by heart. Now, if you forgot to do that, you know, we always fell back on the shortest verse, Jesus loves. Jesus wept, you know. And so it was one of those things. But the other rules you had, you will know your multiplication table to the 12 by heart, or you don't go to 5th grade. Guess what? We learned it. I still know it. So in our zest in education in Florida, we raised the bar, we raised the standards, which we should have. We put into place levels of accountability, but we grossly went too far in testing. In the last few years, we have grossly over-tested our students. In fact, some of our counties and some of our districts in Florida, Leon is not unusual, almost half of the days of the school year are devoted to some type of testing. Now, there are those in the legislature who say, we don't have that many state tests. Well, that's correct. However, we do build into teacher evaluation systems a measurement for growth. So how do you measure how much a student grows? You give a post-test and a pre-test, obviously. So we had all these pieces put together, and we found ourselves in the last few years, our students changing their attitude towards school. They did not want to go to school because of the overabundance of testing. We were just testing too much. Teachers were not able to teach. So this year we took, I think, a giant step forward, got more work to do. We're limiting the amount of tests throughout the state this year, and we're cutting back on the amount and not allowing districts to do as much pre-testing as we have in the past. So I think you'll see a difference this year in that, but we still got more work to do with that. Let me talk about charter schools for a moment. Charter schools are public schools. We're very fortunate in Leon County to have some of the best charter schools in this state. Arts and Sciences up Thomasville Road, we started that many years ago. It's a great school. You got Florida High, that's a charter school for Florida State University. We've got good examples of charter schools in this community. We've also had some charter schools in this community that have gone under. Now, the difficulty with that and the problem with that is not just going under financially. What has happened is those students lose a year, sometimes 2 years of education, which is hard to catch up. So what you're seeing now in charter school movement throughout the state is you've got a lot of charter schools that are run by large corporations and companies for profit. And that's a discussion for another day. But what's happening in the charter school community is that there's charter schools, legitimate, good, quality charter schools, are concerned about the image and the offshoot, if you will, of some of those charter schools that are not doing well. So you can anticipate some legislation this year with charter schools. But again, in my opinion, we're doing very well in Florida. You know, you do hear though, when you compare us to other countries, keep in mind that the way we operate public schools in this country is far different than some other countries. Turkey, for example, I was just speaking to someone going to Turkey, and the students there have to make so much progress a year, or they don't go to college. So it's much more restrictive and less free, if you will, in some of the other countries that we're compared with. And I know, for example, if we were to look around this room, I can pick out a lot of people that can run a mile a lot easier than Ted and I. And so if you only pick the cream of the crop to go to college and to be able to be tested, then your scores will naturally be higher. Let's talk about Medicaid for a moment. That's what caused us to come in, or to be called into special session. As you, I'm sure you will, you know, if you don't, I'm glad to tell you, that the House closed up 3 days early, illegally, might add, and went home. We were on the floor, Senate floor, debating fracking, of all things. And it was one time we were all paying attention. Senator Richter, who's our president pro tem, was giving an impassioned presentation on fracking. And all of a sudden, we started looking around, everybody's phone started buzzing, and even the president got distracted, and he had just received a message from the Speaker of the House, phone message, they closed up, went home, literally, which sort of shuts the system down. You know, there are 2 houses. And all that really stemmed from what the Senate's fixed program, or the Medicaid program. And if I may just tell you what it is, we don't have to get into a long argument unless you want to about the merits of it. The fixed program, the Senate program, quite frankly, was not an extension of Obamacare. It was characterized as that by some. It was not. Simply put, we have about 800,000 to 900,000 people in Florida, which 300,000 to 400,000 of those are children, who have no health insurance. Now, these are not people that qualify for other services. These are working people who simply cannot afford to put food on the table and buy insurance. They're the working poor. They just don't make the wage. They have no insurance. So what happens is they and their children do not have access to that health care, so when they really get sick, they go to the hospitals. They go to the emergency rooms, and you know what the costs are there, and you know who absorbs those costs. If the costs are absorbed by those of us who have insurance or other means by which to pay our bills. That's why the hospitals and everybody was on board with this plan as well. Simply put, the fixed plan, the Senate plan, was a plan to draw down $50 million of our tax dollars that went to the federal government, get that money back, use those funds to subsidize privately provided health care coverage with insurance companies. And whoever got it would pay some themselves based on their income. You had to be working, or you had to be looking for a job, or you had to be in school, or you had to be taking care of a sick or elderly relative at home. There was some concern expressed by the House that said, well, we don't know if the federal government will continue to send us that money. So we went back and amended that plan and said, if at any point the federal government ceases to contribute to to Florida these funds, then this program will be null and void and will go away. That plan was not accepted. It was voted down by the House, so we're back to where we are now, and that is 800,000 uninsured people who will continue to go, quite frankly, will continue to go to the emergency rooms or won't get health care. We were brought back into special session for one purpose, and that purpose was to pass the budget. Our budget this year was $78.2 billion. The governor vetoed $461 million of that. And I think anybody can go through the list, and you could probably make an argument that this one should not have been vetoed or this one should have. Quite frankly, in my case, I did pretty well. I got 55 passed and only 13 vetoed. I told the governor, I thanked him. I said, now you vetoed a couple that I really wish you had, because I think you made a mistake on those. There are a couple on there that if I'd been you, I would have vetoed. I put those in there hoping he'd veto those and leave my other one alone. You know how that works. He's a lot smarter than I am, a lot richer too, by the way. But I did well, but he did veto the record amount. We also had those $427 million in tax cuts, and I would assume that would be pleasing to you. It is to most groups when I speak to them. Now, I would give you a word of caution. I think what we need to start doing, though, is let's see the impact that those cuts will have. We've been cutting hundreds of millions of dollars over the last few years in taxes, and I don't know anybody that likes to pay taxes. But I think it's time we pause and say, okay, now let's see what we're not going to get for those dollars that we're cutting. I mean, it's real simple. It's your own home budget. If you continue to cut, at some point, you're going to have to not do something or not have a service that you've wanted and enjoyed in the past. So I think we've got to be very careful with that and tie it into something. Let's look at exactly what we're doing and how those tax cuts will impact the services that this government is supposed to provide. State employees, one more time, we did not give state employees a raise. Now, you would expect me to say this because I represent more state employees than anybody else, but it's the truth. State employees have gotten one raise in 8 years. During that same 8 years, though, remember, we took 3% back from them for their retirement. Now, we can argue all day about whether that was good or bad, but let me give you a couple of thoughts. One, the argument is why should state employees have a fully funded retirement system and not put any money in there? Most business people have to contribute, so why shouldn't state employees? And if you recall, you didn't hear a lot of uproar from state employees about the 3%. So the good argument can be made, they got skin in the game, that's 3%. But at the same time, they haven't had a raise in 8 years. And I know some of the business people, some of them may be in this room, haven't had a raise in 8 years either. In fact, you may have been going backwards in 8 years. And that's true, and we know that. But if you look at the far impact of this, 20 years down the road or less, if you look at what brings young people, bright young people, into public service in the state government work, for example, 3 things. One, the salary, which they won't get rich. That just won't happen. Second is a stable retirement system. The Florida retirement system, regardless of what you might hear, the Florida retirement system is one of the most sound retirement systems in this country. It's been ranked as high as 5th in the country. It's a good retirement system, steady retirement system. Now, I would also suggest to you, though, that the everyday state worker, it's very difficult for that person to spend 30 years in state government and retire and not have to continue to work. But they accept that. One of the things we tried to do in the last 4 or 5 years is tinker with the retirement system. I don't think we should do that. We've got a good, sound retirement system. I think let's leave it alone. We've got other problems to deal with. The second thing, or the third thing that attracts people to state work government are the health insurance coverage. And that's become even more important in the last few years. Again, I know I'm speaking to a business group, and I know how expensive it is. I know how much you have to pay for that health coverage. But I think we've got to be very careful that we don't put our state employees to the position that they simply can't afford to work for the state anymore. There's a good argument can be made that we should be out recruiting some of the best and brightest people to work and serve in state government. There's been a lot of discussion about environmental spending. Amendment 1. There's a lot of people who are disappointed in what we did in the legislature this year relative to Amendment 1. I'm one of those. I'm disappointed that we didn't do more to reflect the wishes of the 75% of the people who voted for Amendment 1. But let me share with you some of the discussions, if I may. On the surface, if you look at Amendment 1, $400 million a year to be set aside for that's a lot of money for a long time. There are some that want the money to be spent acquiring more land. I personally agree with that. I think we should, but I also believe that we should take some of that money and manage the lands that we already have. And we've got some of that in North Florida, so we need to be able to spend some of that money on that as well. We got them to, during that campaign for Amendment 1, we brought in the issue of springs. That's especially dear to us in North Florida. There were 5 of us, bipartisan. I was the only Democrat, but you had Charlie Dean, Senator Hayes, Senator Simpson, and Senator Simmons. We got together 3 years ago and put together a bill that would protect the springs throughout Florida, but especially it would have an impact on Central and North Florida. So Amendment 1 money now can be spent on springs. So the question, if you really get down to it, an example that we use sometimes, it might be somewhat controversial. If you look at Wakulla Springs, the city has spent millions, tens of millions of dollars trying to clean up Wakulla Springs, and by the way, done a great job with it. The question is now, and it's a simple one, I don't want to get in anybody else's business, but if you look at Woodville, for example, should Amendment 1 money be spent in Woodville for sewer systems by government to protect Wakulla Springs? I mean, that's a philosophical question. It's a philosophical issue. Is that an appropriate expenditure of Amendment 1 money to protect Wakulla Springs, to put in sewer systems in areas like Woodville? I'm not advocating that, and I mean, I'm not getting anybody's business, but it's an example of the issues that we're going to have to deal with. Redistricting, our next special session begins August 10th, a couple of weeks from now. As you might know, that we in the Senate, we struck out twice. We've got to go back and redraw congressional lines again. That may very well change. Nobody knows because we can't talk to each other. We've been given a gag order. I'm one of the 4 Democrats on that committee, and we literally been told we can't talk to anybody, any congresswoman, congressperson, staff, or anybody else. We got the court system monitoring what we're doing, which is good. There is some speculation that our congressional district here might change. The lines may change here in affecting Congresswoman Graham's current district. We kicked that off August 10th. It's supposed to be out in 11 days. Personally, I don't think it's going to take us that long. Now, who knows? We'll be there longer. But I'm a Democrat, so I'm not exactly in the know on some things. But I don't believe we'll be there that long. I mean, it's pretty simple what we have to do. So hopefully we'll get that done and get out of town. The regular session this year, rather than March and April, will be January and February. So we'll start committee meetings in September this year. So we'll start in August. We'll pick up committee meetings in September, and we'll be back in session in January. In closing, let me tell you there's one issue that I want to bring to your attention. I know you're aware of it. But in Florida, certainly in North Florida, we have a tremendous problem with poverty and hunger, especially among our children. And I would ask that you keep those families in your prayers. The children, regardless of what parents do, children suffer sometimes from what the parents do or don't do. And we have a rising number of young people, children, who are living in poverty and are hungry. It's called, I forgot there's a term for it, meal instability or something. They don't know where the next meal's coming from.
Food insecurity.
What's it?
Food insecurity.
Food insecurity. And it's a serious issue. And it's one that is going to take a tremendous coordinated effort to try to address that issue. So, ladies first.
In your reference to the Amendment 1 money for sewers in Woodville, I don't know what your opinion on that, but I think that would be a good use of those funds, since Wakulla Springs is a state park. I don't think the locals should have to pay for all of that.
If you didn't hear what she said, I'm thinking while I'm repeating this. She said that's a state park, so why should local governments pay for retrofitting, if you will, the sewer system to protect Wakulla Springs? Well, the statement could very well say, you're sending us your sewer, so you need to correct your problem and save our state park. But again, that's a good example of the argument that we got in. It passed, and then all of a sudden we were in session, and how do we allocate these funds? But you'll see a vigorous, robust discussion this year on that. Now, how are those funds going to be spent?
So you didn't say what your position is.
I believe. No, I'll tell you. I think you need to look at it case by case, and if you got this example here, I don't see anything wrong with doing whatever necessary, including acquiring more land around Wakulla Springs to protect the spring. Because if you look at it from an economic standpoint, you saw what happened to Wakulla Springs, it's coming back. But if we lose it, it's gone. Look at Lake Okeechobee, okay? All you gotta do is look at Lake Okeechobee. We have a massive problem. We spent $300 million this year trying to clean up parts of Lake Okeechobee, okay? And where it started, that pollution starts in Orlando. Okay. Now the question is, again, it's an argument about Amendment 1 money. Do we purchase land between Orlando and Lake Okeechobee called water farms? Do we purchase land and keep that water on this land to keep it out of Lake Okeechobee so that it doesn't flow east and west into the Gulf and into the Atlantic? And quite frankly, in my opinion, we weren't prepared this session to be able to have those kind of discussions. We had a lot of money allocated, but we didn't have a plan, if you will, that was structured well enough to be able to spend that money. But you'll see it this year. Is that what you said? No. I missed your question.
What would you say?
Thank y'all for inviting me. It's been a pleasure to be here. Some of those people are going to be on the news Monday afternoon. That's the first thing I'd ask them.
Hang on just a minute. Scott, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, we want to thank you, and I want you to keep this on your desk so everybody knows that you are a supporter of NEBA.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
I just have one announcement. Next month's program is Peter Schweitzer. He's an author. He's written some books on Clinton and other folks. Where he's going to talk about the new one. I'm glad to see he's picking on the Republicans. He's going to be talking about George Bush. So next, is he going to talk about Jeb?
And Hillary.